Please join me in the responsive reading found in your order of service. Let us open our hearts and hands to a new communion. For to commune is not to believe impossible things. To say one beggar to another, I know where bread is. Good morning, everybody. My name is Brian Walters. For those of you who don't know me, I've been a member here for a little over 15 years now, and I've had the pleasure of serving as the chair of the governing board for the last year and a half. I'm getting ready to just finish my term. And what a morning it is. You've already demonstrated your commitment to Fountain Street Church by being here this morning rather than being on your back porch sipping a coffee and enjoying the fall colors, perhaps with a copy of the New York Times. But I'm glad that you're here. I always have to pause for a minute when I'm up here on the pulpit because it's just awesome. And what's awesome about it is not just this beautiful sanctuary, it is beautiful. And what's awesome about it is not just thinking about the amazing speakers who have shared this pulpit over the years. What's really amazing about it is looking out at this community and seeing so many friendly and familiar faces that have become a very important part of my life and my family's lives. My son Jackson, my youngest son, is 12 years old, so he's in the middle school group in the Tower Club, and he asks me sometimes, why do we have to go to church? Not an uncommon refrain from 12-year-olds who are being brought to church. And my answer to Jackson is, we don't have to come to church. We want to come to church. This is a place that we want to be, that we value, this community. And he's kind of getting it. It might take a while, give him a couple more years, but he's getting there. Being part of this community is why I come to church. When I think about our mission to free the mind, grow the soul, and change the world, for me at least, that happens through community, because I can learn more and free my mind more by being part of this community and hearing the thoughts and ideas of others than I can just on my own. I can grow more as a person by being part of this community, as opposed to just being on my own. And I can do far more to help change the world by working with you as part of this community collectively than I ever could on my own. And I can also share the joys and the sorrows of my life, what we call in the character school the roses and thorns, with people that I know care about me. And it's not just about me. This church has meant a great deal to my family as well. My wife Angie, who many of you know, has been very active in the character school and the parent circle group and has made just a number of fantastic friends here. My son Ethan, I talked about a little bit last year. He's in the high school now in 9th grade. He's the one who had the Until Love is Equal t-shirt that he wore until it was about 3 sizes too small. And he's now in the Fountain Club, and I see Todd over there, and he's just loving his time with the group so far, and it's been a real blessing to have him be able to be involved in that. And my youngest son Jackson, I mentioned, is a middle schooler in the Tower Club. I'll let you know a little bit more about how he feels about church after he gets done with the Planned Parenthood program this year in the middle school. So that's a to be determined. I want to leave you with a quote from Sir Winston Churchill, who happens to be the namesake for my high school that I grew up in Livonia, who said, "We make a living by what we get. We make a life by what we give." Welcome to Fountain Street Church, an independent liberal church in Grand Rapids, Michigan, helping you free your mind, grow your soul, and change the world, making the life that you are looking for. We seek to be what the prophet Isaiah called a house of prayer for all people. You belong here. Welcome and good morning.
Thank you. A calming presence from one of the most performed contemporary composers. I think Mr. Pärt is Estonian, or thank you very much. And his music sometimes arises from that experience in the Baltics, although exactly how is something we have to discern for ourselves. It's time to venture toward the message this morning. Before I do that, it's been my custom and will be, and if you notice my lapel, I'm wearing a button that says Black Lives Matter. If you share that sentiment, I have other buttons I can sell you. I wish I could give them away, but they're not free. I also have yard signs. If you want your neighbors to know that Black Lives Matter, you can buy one from me, not the church, for $7 a piece. Again, I wish I could give them away, but I can't. But I'm reminding you that a year ago in Rocky Ford, Colorado, outside of Denver, somewhere around 2:30 a.m., there was a police shooting. Details of the incident cannot be released, said the police force then. The victim's sister-in-law said a man walked into their home, and then a police officer forced open the front door. He was standing next to his mom, his back turned toward the officer, and then the officer shot him twice in the back and pepper sprayed him. The story will be updated, and that was a year ago. I wonder what's happened since. I lift up a name only because names need to be said. I'm trying to find the name to make sure I get it just right. The gentleman's name was, hang on here, because I had to find it online this morning. Jack Jaquez, 27, of Colorado. Died October 12th, 2014. Because Black Lives Matter. In the Christian lectionary this morning, churches are reading from the book of Mark, as we shall do. In the 10th chapter, there's this passage about Jesus. And it says, as he was setting out on a journey, a man ran up and knelt before him and asked him, "Good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus said, "Why do you call me good? No one is good but God alone." That gets overlooked sometimes. You know the commandments, says Jesus. You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, you shall not defraud, honor your father and mother. The man said to Jesus, "Teacher, I have kept all these since my youth." Jesus, looking at him, loved him. You can imagine the smile. And said, "You lack but one thing. Go, sell what you own and give the money to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me." When the young man heard this, he was shocked and went away grieving, for he had many possessions. I feel the weight of the day upon me. I have made it my resolution from this point forward in my career, whichever dwindles, that I should try to be as honest as I can and as real as I can, but also not to get into oversharing, as we now call it, TMI, too much information. And yet the reality is that most preachers, most people in public, massage themselves a little bit to make it more palatable. So I'm struggling here to be more frank and more real and more authentic, but also not make you wince. We'll see how that works out. I'm on a path this year. I'm on a path every year, so are you. But the preaching path I'm on, the pilgrim journey that is always the soul of liberal religion, is an inward one more than an outward one. To connect, to commune, and to commit in this fall, to engage in a more conscious, deep, and lasting way the things that matter. We started in September. And I'm going from mind to heart, from thought to feeling, because in September I reminded us that liberal religion can become disconnected from its own depths, from its own length, from its own breadth, and become a flat, narrow, shallow slogan of a thing that says, oh, you can believe anything you want, or you don't need to believe anything, or everything goes around here, which is manifestly not true. That's the two-dimensional shadow version of our faith. We have to be mindful, as everyone else ought to be, that religion, to be real, has to be three-dimensional like we are, to live through time as though time mattered, to live within the community of the church and of the world as though everyone mattered, to live inside of our own souls and minds as though they mattered too. Knowing this is important, and we should do so every week, but knowing is only the first step. A journey is obviously many steps, and we need the heart to move us forward as well as the mind. Yes, minds connect abstractly with things, but hearts commune with things. So now let's allow our feelings to lead us. I know we wish to be people of thought. We're what they used to call the thinking man's religion, but we're not the heartless man's religion either. The fully three-dimensional faith that liberates and animates and agitates is as full of feeling as it is of thoughts. And so this month I will consider ways that our feelings lead us spiritually and ways that they impede us at the same time. So we start with a story. Here's where I got to get real. So it's Christmas morning, and I'm in my pajamas. I might be 8 years old. My brother and my sisters are unwrapping the gift in that flurry of terror that our parents have so helpfully put together for the last few nights. But of course, Santa brought them. My brother and I have identical boxes that could contain bowling balls, but we know they don't. We are both hoping for a Steve Canyon jet pilot helmet. For those under 50, Steve Canyon is a missing figure in your community. But when I was a child and in my parents' youth, he was a comic strip character who at one point fought the Nazis on Sunday and fought the Koreans in the newspapers after that. And as he moved into the latter part of the 20th century, went from flying airplanes to flying jet planes. He was quite the hero, and he wore those white helmets with the visors and the oxygen mask. And every boy, perhaps some girls, wanted one too. And there they were, unwrapping before our eyes on Christmas morning. We feverishly went inside. A note fell out of mine, but not out of my brother's. It was from Santa, it said, though its writing was more feminine than I thought it should have been. And it explained to me that so many boys, those were the days when we talked about boys, wanted these this year that he was nearly out, and this last one sadly had a cracked visor. It asked me to understand that my brother, being 2 years younger, would not understand, but you being older, you can. And I did understand. And I was still bereft. But what can you say? Santa explained it all. There was no one to take my sadness to. And far from understanding in a mature way, what I understood was that somehow I deserved the broken gift while my brother deserved the one that was not. My heart ached. Not only for getting the lesser gift, but for being expected to, for being the one who, in some sense, deserved it. Over the years, there have been moments when I felt demoted, diminished, overlooked, blamed, and they each reinforced this heartache of being lesser, less important, not as good as, deserving of coming in last. More than once in my adult life, more than I would like to admit to you or anyone else, I felt inward rage or inward sorrow at events that everyone else would have shrugged off, but they found that point in me that felt wounded. And I responded to the pain of what felt like rejection. And that reinforces it too. You come to expect those moments that point to your heartache and say, see, you are as bad as you think. You are as ugly as you fear. You are as undeserving as you suspect. When I talk about heartache, I'm not talking about lost romantic love. I'm talking about a loss or a pain or an injustice so deeply set in us that it becomes part of who you are, that it becomes part of how you define yourself, a way in which you understand your own identity. I know this is not unique to me because we have all seen Citizen Kane and remember him breathing on his deathbed the word rosebud, wondering what it could mean, and then we learn only at the end that it was a sled he had as a child, and he was searing in the loss of his childhood. And that defined this character's life. His climb to fame and fortune was driven by this sense of loss. But it's not just literature. How many of us who remember Richard Nixon remember his vaunting ambition that seemed somehow tied to a relentless sense of being cheated or denied, so that every victory came with a sour rejection as well? I suspect that we all have in us something that makes us wince when touched. It wouldn't hurt someone else, but it would hurt you or me. Something that makes us defensive that others would not mind at all. And we all end up making those wounds part of ourselves. So we become the screw-up or the wallflower, the bad boy. You know the roster. You all have one inside you. The one that if it gets touched, even now you can find yourself flinching. And we spend our lives either hiding them, denying them, or battling them. You all remember the Charlie Brown cartoons from years ago? Remember the one about, it's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown? And they all went trick-or-treating. And I literally, it broke my heart when Charlie Brown looks in his trick-or-treat bag and says, "I got a rock." That's what my life felt like. Candy, candy, candy. Oh, Fred, rock. You have something like that too. You don't have to tell me. I just know that you do. I'm here to lift up the heartaches that are in every one of us that we try to protect or wish weren't there. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. This is all stuff any psychologist could have said in far less time. But I'm raising it for two spiritual reasons. The first one is that this experience is universal. You may have your own heartache, your own wound, your own sorrow, but everyone else has one too. And we're all walking wounded, covering up the part we don't want to get wounded. And we wonder why we collide with each other and why families don't always get along and why spouses somehow quarrel. And you can be sure that at some point it's that deep wound, that sense of heartache that one is protecting from the other or has just touched, even by accident. But it's not just individuals. This is the point I want to raise up even more. When we listen to and watch the collapse of good sense in Washington, the hatred directed at Muslims, the anti-abortion protests outside this church last week and over on Cherry Street yesterday, the persistence of racism despite knowing that it should go away, all the divisions in the world, cultures, communities, religions, and nations, I see wounds, heartaches in nations, in religions, and communities, deep-seated sorrows that cannot be extirpated just by the mind alone. I see grudges nursed for generations. In reading a book about church struggle, I came across this joke that was told by the author. It's a joke about two Anglican churches on the north of England, on the North Sea. It's contemporary, and it's about how these two tiny churches, we'll call them Dilby and North Dilby, each had like a dozen worshipers in a vast cavern of a cathedral-like building. And so the bishop came up in his car and went to each one and said, "You are too small to be worshiping in two churches. I'll leave it to you, though, decide which one you're going to meet in, and I'll come back in 6 months and we'll close whichever one won't be used." He comes back in 6 months and nothing has happened. He goes to the church in Dilby, it's the first one coming up from the south, and says, "So, what's the deal here, people? I gave you 6 months. Why haven't you united?" The leader, the warden, the chief of the vestry says, "We can't live with them. It's not possible." The bishop says, "Why not?" And the man says, "They never warned us when the Danes came. Back in the 10th century. You laugh, but you understand what happens. The grudges can be nursed for generations. They are the cause not only of sorrow and strife, but of wars, of borders, of crimes. Have you ever been hurt and the place tries to heal a bit, said Rosa Parks, and then you just pull the scar off of it over and over again? You've all done that. We've all done that. And then it hurts again. Or someone bumps into you where you've hurt, and suddenly it's bleeding all over again. Individuals, families, nations, religions, cultures are defined by the wounds they gave each other. And then they pick at the scab, and then they wonder why they aren't healing. In fact, we get to the point where we cannot imagine being who we are without our heartaches. And because of that, here's the second spiritual reason. They become prisons. We think we're safe inside when we're protected from the outside world and its pains. How many people, perhaps some of us, rejected a church or a faith because of the pain it caused you? And years later, you can still wince when you hear the words. Or you define your non-belief in terms of that other belief, so that the only thing you can think is, I don't believe in that anymore, and therefore I cannot believe in anything anymore. The scar that covers the pain keeps us from feeling the pain, to be sure, but it can also prevent you from growing in that place. It encloses it, whether it's trust betrayed, hope dashed, love denied, faith exploited. They can make any one of us fearful of trying again, lest we hurt again. Once burned, twice shy, right? We all know that. The dying church of Dilby would rather perish than forgive a wound that has become their identity. And that's the problem. When we contemplate changing, individually or otherwise, we think of what we lose, not what we gain. We can feel the death, we cannot feel the life. Heartaches make us so worried about losing even the heartache that the thought of a new life is more terrifying than living with the old pain. My pastoral care professor long ago told me you have 3 jobs to do: find the pain, touch it gently, and give it a name. I have tried to do that for 35 years. I've succeeded from time to time. But I think the same can apply to families, churches, religions, and nations. We have not found the way to find the pain, to touch it gently, to give it a name. And so it lives inside of us, unnamed, untouched, and therefore unable to heal. Heartache is everywhere because we are imperfect creatures and we are imperfect communities. My mother didn't intend to hurt my feelings with her Santa note, but it still hurt anyway. And telling her I was hurt was impossible. After all, she didn't write the note, remember? Now let's go to the gospel lesson. In the lesson, we have the story of the rich man asking Jesus how to gain eternal life. And he does all the right things, follows all the right rules, commandment, commandment, commandment. Then Jesus says, do one more thing. Sell all that you have and join me. And the rich man left because he had many possessions. I guess what I'm saying is that sometimes, a lot of the times, we are possessed of our heartaches. We all know people who can't seem to get beyond a certain point in their lives, who cannot accept a compliment, who cannot give praise, who do not know thanks, for whom their lives seem a conscious choice to be miserable. They are attached to their heartache. And every one of us is in our own way. The Buddha had a great insight that became Buddhism. It's a very simple insight. Attachment is suffering. Whenever we feel attached to our pains or our possessions, we therefore suffer because of that attachment. But it's hard to give those things up. There's a woman interviewed who was found in a house filled with papers, one of those hoarders, you know, stuffed with newspapers and magazines and everything she ever owned. And as they were trying to get her to throw something out, she picked up a receipt from a grocery store. And she said, "No, I have to keep that." "Why?" "Well, if I lose that, I lose that day." Are we not hoarders of our own pain? Possessed of our own heartaches? Comforted oddly by our own sorrows and our own grudges? It is indeed hard to relinquish the painful things that actually did make us who we are. But we all know that the spiritual task of every individual, of every religion, if you pay attention, is not to be, but to become. In the cycle of the Jewish scripture this week, Isaiah says, "I have grasped you by the hand, opening eyes deprived of light, rescuing prisoners from confinement, from the dungeon of those who sit in darkness." The message of every prophet is to awaken, to come out, to be freed. It has been said for millennia over and over again, because we still say, "Yes, I know I should become, but if you make me give up this heartache, I lose myself. I cease to be me." And the promise is, that's all right. You can be yourself and someone else too. But we don't trust that message. We don't believe it. Better a misery in the hand than a promise in the bush. And there is the ultimate prison of heartache. It imprisons us in our identity. We become the screw-up, the wallflower, the bad boy. I was the fat kid for a long time. In my head, I still am. An identity we cannot lose because it is the only person we know we can be. But if you are here, and I am here, I know that, because we know the spiritual task is to become. Elsewhere in the gospel, a man comes to Jesus and says, "Yes, I believe, but help my unbelief." In our hearts, we only half believe. We still do not believe entirely that if we become, we will still be the same person. And that's why we need to hear it over and over. You need to hear it from me, who is struggling along with you. Because the liberal faith is a call to struggle. By the way, the word in Arabic for struggle is jihad. Yes. Not to struggle against an outsider, but an insider. To struggle against your own prisons that you built for yourself, that you thought would comfort you and protect you, but instead confined you. Last week I referred to Jacob wrestling with the angel. That is our story. But all the great prophets struggled. Every one of them. None of them walked through the earth gleefully predicting this. They all struggled. They all had terrible times. That's what it is to be spiritually alive. To be spiritual is to struggle. There is no serenity that you get for showing up in church. It should be hard. It should be difficult. It should be difficult and unpleasant. Because everything in life that matters is difficult, and you know that. If you wanted it to be easy, you have every other church in America to go to. Let's remember that liberal religion is about liberation, about your liberation, and the only one who can free you is you. And you have to crawl out of your own scars, open up your own prisons to get out of it. And we only get the courage by saying, "Hey, if you will, I will." I struggle daily with my heartache that confines me. The awful demons that tell me I'm fat and ugly and incompetent. If I were a really great preacher, why isn't this place full every blessed week? And it's not. If I was a great minister, we'd be rolling in money, but we're not. So I struggle every week to banish the demons of my own misery and say, I have a mission to preach. And you have a mission to hear. And together we can struggle and liberate ourselves further than we were last week. And maybe then we can liberate the world a little further than it went last week. That's what freeing the mind is about. That's what growing the soul is about. That's what changing the world is about. So I suffer. I still suffer, and so do you. Because spirituality is not sitting around being serene. It's to suffer on purpose. Because now I struggle to become. Not against the things that change me, but toward the person I wish to be. It is the suffering of becoming, which is the suffering of childbirth, when you think about it. Is there anything more painful, women, than giving childbirth? It's miserable. Are you glad you did it? 100%. It's always a miracle to me there's brothers and sisters at all. The pain of becoming is worth the struggle. The pain of becoming is worth the struggle. That is the suffering worth enduring. So if you come to me saying, I feel bad because of what I feel, said, are you moving towards something else? No, then get thee behind me, Satan. But if you wish to become someone, let me go with you. Come along with me. Let us open our heartaches to each other. Let us start to tear them apart. Let us give birth to our spiritual selves. That's why I belong to this place, because Fountain Street Church is the midwife of my future self. There's a thought. Fountain Street Church, where souls are born. And that's enough for today. Amen and amen. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be found true in thy sight, thou who art my rock and my redeemer. I went too long, too bad. Sometimes it takes an extra word or two. Thank you, thank you. I am grateful. It is an honor to serve you, and now it is my duty to say it is time to sing. Just as long as I have breath. You picked just the right tune, dude. Let's sing it.
Beloved, would you dare to say yes to the practice of the suffering of your becoming? Just once this week, find a pain that would fit in your hand. Touch it gently and give it a name, and then let it go. Peace be with you.